Okie good morning everybody, welcome back to another little video and welcome back to another video in my Inktober drawing series. I'm not gonna lie, it's only a few days into October and I'm already a little bit behind on my Inktober drawings, but I'm determined to not give up. I will catch up somehow. I'm not 100% sure how at the moment, but I will figure out how to catch up eventually. I am filming this currently on Friday the 7th of October, but we are going to hop into our little time machines, travel back a few days to Tuesday, because today we are going to be doing our little drawings for the 4th of October, or the 4th drawing prompt, which is Scallop. As you can probably see, I have actually got quite a big collection of shells. I've got some laid out on the table. I've also got this little jar full of shells. Because scallops instantly makes me think of shells, so I think that's where I'm going to head with this illustration to begin with, is just by studying some shells. But I'm going to start off how I usually do, by sketching out a few little things, and then we'll go from there. So let me grab a pencil, ta-da, and let's get drawing. So in a bit of a break from tradition, I actually decided to start this sketchbook spread by painting a bright background colour that I could then paint some studies on top of. So I grabbed a ruler to create a nice neat rectangle on my page and then filled it in with a bright pumpkin orange acrylic wash. Although to be honest, I may as well have not used a ruler because the rectangle became a little bit weebly wobbly. But anyway, after painting the background, I began sketching out some shells on my page. So I picked a random shell to study and began by doing an illustration of that shell. Although I soon realised that I made a bit of a mistake picking it up, because every time I moved to get paints out or breathed, it would slightly change the position of it. But I basically ended up using a bit of artistic license, and I think I managed to produce an illustration that sort of resembled the shell that I was studying. I then moved on to studying some more shells that were catching my eye and carried on using my acrylic paints to paint down basic layers of colour and texture. Now, not gonna lie, I was in a little bit of a scatty mood when producing this spread, and I was finding it a little bit hard to focus on one thing at a time. So I sort of kept switching between sketching out the shells and then working into them with the acrylic paints. I think it might be because I had so many interesting shells in front of me which I wanted to study, but I only had a little bit of time to do so, and I just wanted to study as many shells as possible. So maybe in the future I should study some more shells, because I found it very interesting looking at all the different colours and patterns and shapes that were on the shells. I really love painting these shells with acrylic paints, as they ended up really bright and colourful, and I particularly like the look of the bluey purpley coloured shells against the pumpkin orange background, which you will see is the colour scheme that I brought into my final illustration. Once I had applied some base colours to the shells, I then got out my Inktense water soluble pencils to add some more tones, colours and textures. I particularly loved the way this looked on the swirly curly snail like shell that I studied, as it started making it look more realistic and was a really quick way of depicting the details on the shell. I then kept alternating between my Inktense water soluble pencils and some white acrylic paints to add more detail. And I worked particularly hard to try and capture the reflective patches on the shell, as I felt that the shiny smooth texture of the shell was a very distinctive feature of them. I then worked into the last few shell studies using some simple line art just to depict some textures and details. Okay, so for a little update, I've just been studying my little shell studies. I actually really love the layout of this page. I was originally going to paint these ones, but I'm not going to lie, I got a little bit bored of drawing them, so I just kind of ended up just roughly sketching them. And actually, I think it could end up making quite like a nice textile print pattern or something like that if I like worked on it a bit more and then put it into repeat and stuff like that on Photoshop. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with my little shell studies, but now what I want to do is sit and kind of draw some animals that I kind of associate with some shells. So other than snails, the first animal or creature that I associated with shells was the crab, in particular the hermit crab. So I began sketching out a hermit crab using my light blue biro pen. I'm not 100% sure why I keep gravitating to this pen, but it seems to be my sketching implement of choice at the moment. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I've always found sea creatures a little bit freaky, as I basically think they're like little sea aliens. They always look really weird and have strange features, but after spending a bit of time studying the hermit crab, I actually became a little bit more fascinated by their anatomy, and even though I will always find them a little bit weird looking, I think there was also something a little bit cute and quirky about them, which as an illustrator is actually quite a good thing, because it's always easier to design a character that has some funny little elements to draw upon than something that is boring and not very interesting. While sketching this little hermit crab out, I also started making a little mental note about what other sea sea creatures or aliens I could associate with hermit crabs, such as octopuses and jellyfish, in case it would help me develop a story for my illustration. So after working into the hermit crab with some black ink, I then started to sketch a more cartoony inspired hermit crab, trying to draw on and exaggerate some of the anatomy that I'd studied in my little pen sketches. So I made the legs look quite big and pointy and gave the character some really big eyes. I then practiced a few eye expressions, drawing some angry eyes and some shocked ones. Okay, so it's actually now a little bit later now. I've just been and had a little bit of a break, but whilst I was having a bit of a break, I decided to sit and try and design my final piece. So I'm not 100% sure what is going on in my brain for it to come up with this. I definitely decided to start off with like the little hermit crab, but I decided to turn his little shell into a pumpkin, and then I thought maybe the octopus is nicking the pumpkin or doing something sinister. I don't know what he's up to. He's just doing something mischievous, and yeah, I just randomly come up with this little idea. I'm now going to sit and transfer it onto a spare piece of paper, get my watercolour paints out and my inks out, and hopefully we'll end up with a nice final piece. So once I transferred the sketch onto a separate piece of watercolour paper, I then started to go over the sketch with a HB pencil, gradually refining and adding some more details to the illustration. So on Obi the octopus, I decided to add some more suction pads along each of his 8 legs, trying to make sure that I positioned them in a way that would indicate the direction that each leg was facing. I also added a bit more detail to the skull that Obi was sitting on and started sketching some more textures onto the shells. I decided at this point that I would also add a circle in the background of the piece where I'd paint the watercolour texture and make it look like some of the other elements were coming out of the circle. As I was drawing over the final piece, I tried to pay particular attention to the different characters' facial expressions. So for Obi, I wanted to make him look a little bit menacing, so I tried to give him like a furrowed eyebrow, and then for Draco the hermit crab, I wanted to make him like a mixture of confused and sad. So yeah, I really focused on making the shapes of the eyes correct in this sketching stage, so that I didn't have to worry about it too much when I came to inking and painting it. Once I'd finished refining the sketch, I got out a black pen and started by inking each of the characters' eyes, making sure to leave little white patches in each. I then moved on to painting a water background using my watercolour paints. To do this, I painted a wash of clean water on the area that I wanted to paint, and then painted on top with different shades of blue watercolour, which allowed the paint to blend and merge together, creating a beautiful water background effect. I then moved on to painting the pumpkin and the water inside the pumpkin. You'll see that I add little specks of orange to the water inside the pumpkin to try and make the water appear translucent, and I think that this started to look very effective. Once I finished putting the base layer on the pumpkin, I moved on to painting Obi and decided to choose some really bright pink and red colours for his character, mainly because I wanted a colour that was just as vibrant as the orange pumpkin, but also because I thought it'd be really fun having a slightly menacing character have a really bright colour scheme. I probably should have looked at a reference photo to get a bit more of a realistic colour scheme for Obi, because I still don't actually know what colour octopuses are in real life, but I love the way that the watercolours blended together to make those lovely little gradients, so overall I'm really happy with Obi's colouring. So moving on, I started painting the skull that Obi was sitting on. Now originally I was a little bit nervous about how to paint this skull, as I was worried it was just going to end up looking like a big blob of white in the middle of the illustration, but actually once I started using some blues and greys for the shading and some like yellowy ochre colours for more highlighted areas, I felt that the skull started looking like it belonged in the illustration and added a nice balance to the picture. I then moved on to painting the anchor on the other side of the illustration. You may notice that the barrel of the anchor changed from being like a long thin rectangle shape to a more barrel shape. This was just because I decided to make it a little bit more realistic after looking up some reference photos for some anchors. I then started painting the shells that were scattered around the base of the composition, using the shell studies that I'd painted earlier as inspiration for the colours, textures and patterns. Moving on, I got out my favourite trusty little blue biro pen and started working onto the illustration with some shading and some mark making. I chose to use the blue pen because I wanted to dull down some of the colours a bit, and I felt like giving the whole illustration a blue hue or tinge would make it look like all the characters and elements of the story were under the sea, and therefore would help tell the story behind the piece better. So I spent a lot of time building up layers of texture and shading, pretty much making sure that all of the illustration was covered in the blue pen. I also added some shade into the base of the illustration, particularly under Draco the crab and the shells, to make sure that they looked like they were sitting on the seabed rather than just floating through midair or through the sea. Once I'd finished with the blue pen, I worked on darkening some of the areas with some black line art, just to improve the shading and to also give the piece that storybook feel that I was after. And there we have it, another illustration completed in my Inktober Draw With Me series. What do you think? I actually really like this piece. I'm still not 100% sure what was going on in my brain when I developed it, and to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if it links that well to the prompt word scallop, but I like the colours in it, and I do think that the characters' expressions work really well at telling the story, especially little Obi's character expression. I'm really impressed with him. Let me know what you think of the illustration in the comment section below. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe to my channel to see more videos from me, and I'll see you again soon with another arty crafty video. Bye!